This one from NBC saying that former Trump inaugural chairman Tom Barrack has been arrested in L.A. Now, of course, according to Bloomberg, we are hearing that he has been charged with acting as an agent of a foreign government and charged with acting in interest of United Arab Emirates, and indeed was arrested this morning, according to the Justice Department. Again, we know him here on Bloomberg as formerly running Colony Capital. He has stepped down from that a few months ago. But then, of course, we know that his affiliation with the inaugural committee for President Donald Trump earlier this year, we know that he had been questioned under oath as part of a government lawsuit alleging the committee illegally overpaid for events at a Washington hotel that was owned by Trump's family business. So, Caroline, certainly headlines, of course, now knowing that he's been charged with acting as an agent of a foreign government and charged with acting in interest of United Arab Emirates. Those headlines just crossing.
Let's get some more, detail on all of this breaking news. Erik Schatzker, I'm pleased to say, is joining us now. A man who knows Tom Barrack well, has interviewed him several times. What do you know about this, Erik?
Well, I know just about as much as you because the headlines are just crossing, Caroline. Tom Barrack has a long-standing relationship with the United Arab Emirates. You may recall that over the past few years, emails emerged between him and the UAE ambassador to the United States, Youssef Al-Taiba, which drew some scrutiny as well. What's not clear, at least to me at the moment, is whether there's any connection here to Barrack's role as chairman of Trump's inaugural committee, or whether the charges that he violated the Foreign Agents Registration Act, concern some other activity he would have allegedly been pursuing on behalf of the UAE.
Erik, I know that the news just crossed the wire, but of course this is a titan of the investing industry. How may he be impacted? How may his investors be impacted on today's news?
Well, significantly, but there are a couple of things to make clear. The first is that he no longer has a role at Colony Capital. He stepped down as executive chairman back in March and sits as a member of the board, and so the degree to which he has any fiduciary responsibility or relationship with Colony investors is much lesser than it once was. What Tom Barrack was in the process of doing was starting a new venture in which he wouldn't have the kinds of limited partners that you have in a fund, or wouldn't have the kinds of shareholders that you have in a publicly traded REIT like Colony. What he was trying to do was drum up commitments from deep-pocketed co-investors, sovereign wealth funds, for example, in the UAE, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, and persuade them to invest alongside him in what he described to me as, quote-unquote, elephants that he was hunting. These unique, complex, if not unique, rare transactions that he felt he'd be able to source as a real estate investor with 40 years of experience.
Erik, what do you think are some of the next steps? As you mentioned, being charged acting in interest of the United Arab Emirates, being charged with acting as an agent of a foreign government. What does this mean? Where do you go from here?
First, I think we have to find out who else might be charged, right? That'll give us a much better idea of the extent of this case. How wide it reaches, who it touches, how it originated, those kinds of things. I presume that when an indictment is formally unsealed, we'll get some of those details, and then we'll have a better idea of just how wide a damage circle there is. As far as next steps, for Tom Barrack himself, at least his professional life as opposed to his legal concerns. Probably not that much immediately, because this new venture of his, which he was calling Falcon Peak Partners, and which I spoke to, about which I spoke to him last week, was barely off the ground. He was in the process of I guess, putting together a deal. Let's call it a deal, in which he would contribute some capital, and possibly the Saudis would contribute some capital to develop Amman, the ultra-luxury Amman resorts in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. But it's not clear to me, whether the ink was drawn on that agreement yet. And so that could be the first casualty of the situation.
Erik Schatzker, really appreciate your time, your comments here. And indeed, you guys, we are just getting more news. A 7-count indictment has been unsealed today in the New York federal court. So we will be reading through these to see what other further headlines that we continue to get from this.